world said a final farewell to Queen Elizabeth II today. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not more, lining the streets in London as the Queen's coffin made a final journey. Then a long walk at Windsor Hall for the committal service. CBS 2's Kristine Johnson has more on the day's historic events.
The sound of bagpipes filled empty streets around Westminster, a secure path for the Royal Navy to lead King Charles, his siblings, and sons, Princes William and Harry, in the royal procession to Westminster Abbey. The Queen's coffin, draped in the Scottish Royal Standard, sat atop a 123-year-old gun carriage with rich royal history. First used by Queen Victoria, it's the same one used for the Queen's father, King George VI. From princes to presidents, more than 2,000 guests filled the centuries-old church to honor the late Queen, who died at age 96. The royal family followed the coffin of their monarch and matriarch into the Abbey, including the young heirs to the throne, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, now second and third in line of succession. The Queen helped plan her funeral down to the smallest detail, including hymns played at her coronation and her wedding to Prince Philip. The service ended with 2 minutes of silence in the Abbey and across the nation. And the revised national anthem, God Save the King. After the funeral, a procession full of pageantry took the Queen's coffin through the historic heart of London, giving the public one more chance to say goodbye. The Queen's coffin was carefully removed from the gun carriage and then placed in a glass hearse for a final trip through the countryside that she loved.
All who follow the Queen's example and inspiration of trust and faith in God can with her say, we will meet again.
Joining me now from London, CBS 2's Kristine Johnson outside Westminster Abbey, where the funeral was held. And you've been there for the entire time since her passing on September 8th. Kristine, 7:30 tonight, where you are right now. Ceremonies, events, traditions, it's endless, the signs that we see. Just speaking of today, talk about the poignant moments.
Well, geez, I mean, just the tradition, to think how long back in history this all follows, Dana, 1,000 years of royal tradition, and just how many monarchs have been through those abbeys, been lying in state rather, at Westminster Hall. I think today what really brought it home was a lot of the expressions that we saw from our new king, King Charles. There were times during the services at Westminster Abbey, and then of course at St. George's Chapel in Windsor, where he just looked completely grief-stricken, knowing that he was saying his final goodbyes to his mother, and then hearing the new national anthem, God Save the King.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Several times seeing his face over these past 10 days. And you know, generationally speaking, wow, Prince George, Prince Charlotte, the children of the Prince and Princess of Wales, now they were there. And just talking about the generational feeling there and the commitment to tradition, to see them, the King's grandchildren, what about the significance there?
Well, you know, the Queen had always said that in order to be believed, she needed to be seen. And my guess is, by bringing in the younger royals, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, is the way of ushering in the new generation. We didn't know that the two young siblings, were going to be taking part until late last night when that announcement was made. And then seeing them there today, I know that there was some public concern about their age, but with their parents there by their side, they seem to be doing pretty good at the mom and dad thing so far. So I'm sure that they prepared them, you know, before the funeral. And You know, they behaved themselves. They looked as though they were paying attention. And, you know, they have attended various royal events before this. The Platinum Jubilee, the most recent, where they were out celebrating their grandma and her Platinum Jubilee just this past summer.
Now the third and fourth in line to the throne. So many dignitaries from around the world, including President Joe Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. Talk about the presence there, because I'm not going to say it's political, but there are relationships that are political. Oh. This was about these sentimental relationships as well, paying respect to the Queen, the late Queen.
Absolutely. The President and the First Lady actually entered Westminster Hall to see the Queen's coffin lying in state in person. The President there doing the sign of the cross with his Catholic faith and bowing his head and saying a prayer for the Queen. He talked about her while he was there signing the Book of Condolence, and he talked about how she made a life of public service. She made people feel special. She listened intently to what people had to say. And that was really the mark of a great leader, he said, and somebody that we should all be thankful for, that had 96 years of life to serve.
It will be interesting, the future, but let's continue now to talk about today and how this is over these past 10 days, and especially since people were allowed to pay their respects in person to the late Queen's coffin. Tens of thousands of people. I mean, we've just seen all over, of course, all over Great Britain, the mood of them, you know, the patience they've had, the respect, the tears.
In the queue, right?
Yeah, the queue, the line, the queue, yes.
Yeah.
Talk about that,
yes.
Because they waited. They did not care. They had their wristband, but, you know, just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
You know, speaking to the people on the queue, which really had its own identity. Mm-hmm. If you weren't in the queue, you were watching the queue, you were keeping track of the queue. The queue was part of London the past few days. But really, these people, the ones that I spoke to, they just wanted to do something for the Queen. And this was their way of just doing something for the Queen. And I think in a way it also offered them some solace. It gave them a chance to be as close to her as possible before she was laid to rest. And I'll tell you, I had the opportunity of going into Westminster Hall. I applied for a media credential, and thankfully I got it. Mm-hmm. And it was a very moving experience to be in there. You saw people get very emotional as they were bidding their final goodbye. It was just very moving to know how many people that she touched over her 70-year reign. And every single person seems to have something personal to say about her, which tells you the scope of her reach.
The public portion of the ceremony, we know, has ended. There, of course, the family continued on to Windsor. And the lowering of the coffin in the vault. She'll be buried later next to her late husband. And so now it's the family tonight, the family. And lest we not forget, this is a family. They've had their ups and downs, that's for sure, publicly, privately.
It's a great point, Dana, and it's one I'm glad you brought up, because it is a family. You're right, and no family, you know, is without arguments and without drama. And they're a family that has to live on a public stage. You know, we saw the coffin once the services were finished there at St. George's Chapel, and this was really just, I don't even have a word to describe how this made me feel, but seeing the coffin lower down, you know, into the royal vault where the Queen will be laid to rest next to her husband, Prince Philip, was such a moving scene to watch. And just, I'm thinking about her family who were sitting there in that chapel, particularly King Charles, his sister, Princess Anne, their, you know, and the remaining two brothers, and then of course the grandchildren there. And that's the last image, the very last image that we will see of Queen Elizabeth. And it's that sense of public service, that sense of duty, that, you know, that sense of that British saying, you know, carry on, move on and carry on, keep calm and carry on, I think it is. But yeah, it's trying to balance that. The past 10 days, I'm sure, was very, very difficult for them. But now it's a new era, and I think that everything went beautifully today. The funeral services were absolutely beautiful. The pageantry, the tradition, all there. And of course, the love and the honor for their queen. That
military precision as well of all of the different organizations, whether they were the ones who were carrying the coffin in step, and just the music, then afterward the muffled music that we heard and the ringing of the bells, just, and then to see the corgis, you know, and right, I mean,
her pony.
Yes, and her beloved pony, because we know she loved the outdoors. As far as King Charles, any moments of reactions from people about him as king mixed in with their mourning? How are they looking forward?
Well, you know, I think that a lot of people were, you know, even if you're on the fence about him, I think the past few days have really been a test of his character. You know, there's been some mention made of, you know, the pen incident where he got some
I saw that
on his finger. Yes, so there was some, you know, talk of that. But you know, again, you try to put yourself in his shoes, and it's the little things that can kind of put you over the edge sometimes when they're under that much pressure. But I think the fact when he came back from Balmoral Castle, his first return trip to Buckingham Palace, and before he met with all of the heads of state that were waiting for him inside the palace, he had the driver stop the car. Him and the Queen Consort got out of the car and they greeted the people. He wanted to see the people first. And I thought that that said a lot about him. The Queen did that.
Sure.
When she returned after Diana's death. Remember, she got out of the car right before they entered the gates at Buckingham Palace. So, and he went out into the queue, and he shook hands there, once again out in the queue, and he was reportedly said to somebody there that, you know, the Queen wouldn't have believed this if she was here. She wouldn't have believed this turnout. But, you know, now the real business gets started, right? There's talk of him paring down the monarchy, the working number of royals in the monarchy because of the economic situation here in this country and across the Commonwealth. So we'll see how the days unfold, but definitely that is something top of mind, is that paring down of the working royal monarchy members.
Yes, and the patronages, you know, what organizations they support, and help raise money from other people. That part of when we hear paring down, and then you're thinking about these nonprofits and other places. There's a lot ahead. There's a lot ahead, as well as the relationships with Buckingham Palace, with King Charles III, and other countries. There's a lot ahead. His coronation, do we have any idea when that is?
There has been really not a lot of talk about that. If there has been talk, it's all speculation. I was listening to a program, a weekend program on the BBC over the weekend, and one of the points that was made was just the current state of the economy here in England and what the optics of the coronation would look like during this time. But again, you know, nothing of authority being said about a coronation, so that's still to be determined.
Where you are, that building, those platforms across the street from Westminster Abbey, I stood there doing live shots almost 12 years ago for Kate Middleton and Prince William's marriage. What a different atmosphere we have each experienced. What do you take away? And I know the quiet of night was quiet all day, but now the quiet of night, what do you take away, Kristine?
Well, you know, I saw a country unite. I saw people of all different races and religions, backgrounds, make friends with each other, standing in line, waiting to see their queen. And it really resonated that she was a uniter. She was somebody that had the ability, that talent to be able to bring people together and find a common ground. She was never one very careful not to express her opinion, not to give direction, but yet she found a way for people to always come together peacefully. And that's exactly what I saw here this past week. People were so kind to each other. It was very busy here. No horns honking, no yelling going on in the queue. It was more about, hey, are you hungry? Hey, are you cold? And where are you from? They were so welcoming, even to the media. They would hear our accents and they would say, oh, you're Americans, and welcome, welcome. You're here to cover our queen. And they would go on to their own story about whether if they've met the queen or maybe their mother met the queen.
Or they saw her drive by. Right. I did. Hey, Kristine from Dana. I saw her drive by.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we do.
It was the unity.
Yes.
Yeah, it was the unity. And then, of course, I lived here, not in London, but I did live in England for 3 years when I was a teenager. So it did bring back some memories of my childhood here. And I shared a funny story last week with Maurice, and I think it was Jessica. And, my mother and my dad had the privilege of having a luncheon with then Prince Charles at the Air Force Base that we were stationed at. And my mom bought a new dress and a new hat, and boy, was she determined to meet the prince. Towards the end of that luncheon, she still didn't have her chance, and she ran after him, Prince Charles, Prince Charles. And he turned around, and he turned around and he shook her hand and took the time to say hello. And so now we all tease her saying, Mom, you met the king.
Yes. Good point. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. Kristine, you and Allie Bauman, who's also been reporting for us and all of her work at Buckingham Palace, and the people today watching on big monitors, and just would really appreciate. We know logistically it is a challenge. There's a lot of history to learn, and of course, time of day, the time change. So really good work, and thank you and your crew. Thanks. The whole crew, photographers and our producer, just everybody. Tell them great work.
Yes, Matt, Joe, Christy, Lane, I gotta say their names because they all deserve all of the recognition as well. And those 4 a.m. live shots in London, Dana, those will definitely be a highlight of my career.
Hey, me too. I was like, are we kidding? But very important, and so glad. Thank you, Kristine, for your live coverage all these days. We'll see you tonight on CBS 2 News at 5.
Okay.
Kristine Johnson, you can see more of her reports from London, as well as our complete coverage of Queen Elizabeth's funeral on our website, cbsnewyork.com.